Good morning, Facebook friends. Today we are going to have an amazing um, program. We're going to talk about seeing ourselves in living color. We have a young man who's going to come on and he's going to talk about his journey. A lot of us over the last year and a half, we've been remaking ourselves during this pandemic. Some of us actually started remaking ourselves prior to the pandemic. And we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about how diversity plays itself out in marketing and how it plays itself out in dollars, the whole economy. What role do people of color play in this field of retail and service and all of those areas? So, without further ado, and thank you for joining in again with LaRuelist Cafe. Without further ado, we're going to bring on my guest, Steve Jones, a young man who I have just grown to really love and respect. How are you doing,
Th-
Steve?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Janine. It's a pleasure to be here. You and I have had many conversations, and I absolutely love and adore you. And you're one of my favorite human beings. So it's
Goes both
absolutely,
ways, you know that.
it's absolutely great to be here with you, and hopefully, we'll have the type of conversation that we have offline online. So thank you
Yes,
again.
yes.
Yeah.
And so how are you making out in the pandemic? Now you're married, you have a son. How are you all doing?
I have five children.
You have five
And
children. See, I've
yeah,
been watching the, is it soccer? What you have an athlete who was getting
yeah.
ready this
Oh,
week.
that's my high schooler. He's 16. That's young Marcus. He's 16. He plays football in high school.
Okay.
My youngest is 10 years old. He plays basketball. My 16-year-old daughter, she plays, well, not plays, but she's a competitive cheerleader. So she goes around the country
Wow.
competing and cheerleading at the highest levels, and she's amazing. There's nothing she can't do. And then I have two that are already out of the nest. One is in away right now at Howard, and my oldest,
HU.
yeah,
My son,
absolutely,
my son is an alum of Howard.
yeah.
So in his mind, there is no, he said, no, Howard is the Ivy League of the world. I'm like, okay, we take that.
Okay, is that how we're rebranding it now? But
That's how we were branding it.
I can live with that.
And the
And
vice president hasn't made it so bad either, right?
Oh, I know the pricing went up over the past year, but yeah. And then my oldest, he works in advertising. He's a fellow creative genius as well. So he works at a advertising agency focused on healthcare and pharma. So yeah, I'm super proud of all of them and their accomplishments, and they make me proud every day, and want to raise my bar to be like them when I grow up.
I
So
love it.
yeah.
I love it. And I think watching you, particularly your entrepreneurial spirit and your movement forward in life, I'm sure they're using you as a model.
I hope so. I hope so. I've made my share of mistakes, but hopefully I've made my share of positive contributions to their lives. And when they look out there and see what options are out there for them, they include some of the things that my wife and I are doing to
Right.
create a good life for them and their futures. So hopefully they have that to rely on. And the pandemic over the past year, kind of helped to bring us together a lot closer because we were stuck in a nest together. So we made the most of that, of that time. And those are precious moments that once they're gone, you can't really get them back. So it was fantastic. Not if you put aside, obviously, people being hurt by the pandemic, people losing their lives, obviously, those tragedies. I've had personal losses as well in that space. Um, but there were a lot of, it did create some unique possibilities for people, my family as well, because we've never had everyone home for that period of time with each other. And now that it's kind of hopefully on its tail end, you know,
Right.
my daughter decided not to do this second year at Howard remotely. She decided to go on campus, and then my oldest son moved out. He has an apartment with some friends, and they're living, you know, their first, having their first place on their own, the kind of life. Um, so you know, when you look back, those are moments we won't be able to get back, where everyone was, you know, having every meal together.
Hmm.
You know, that was a big deal, you know, for us to sit down and have dinner together every day. That was like, they would always tell me to stop smiling, but I look around the table and I just couldn't stop smiling because I was
We're all
enjoying
here.
that moment. Yeah, we're all here, and I kept telling them there won't be a moment like this where we're spending this much time together for this long again, you know.
I am actually, it's funny we're talking about this because I'm going to have a show with families. It'll be a sequel, and it's going to be about I Have to Live with You. And it's funny. One minister, you know, I've never gone to so many church services because everything was virtual, so I could just sit on a Sunday and just
Yeah,
binge on the virtual. And
yeah,
one minister said it was so funny. He said, "Yes, man, you do have to spend all day with your wife now,
yeah.
your wife."
Yeah,
And wife, you
absolutely.
got to look at that person all day. And it really was a learning curve for many of us being locked in with each other. The way we were shopping last year, everything was
Oh yeah.
delivered to you somewhere, either in the trunk of your car or whatever. It was
Yeah,
really
no.
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we continue some of that. We still use some of the you know, food delivery services because we got used to the convenience of someone showing up and putting our groceries out, and we don't have to
Right?
do that as much, and you know, cleaning service. So we got a lot of businesses learned how to do business virtually, and I don't think there's any going back. So the hybrid business model is here to stay for corporate offices and for retailers. They figured out, you know, I still pull up and have them bring my groceries out to the car when I need it, you know. So having to be in aisles in the old model of the way business and commerce used to be conducted, all of that's been disrupted. So there's been a lot of positives outside of the loss of human life, um, that's come out of the pandemic. And you know, I think that the world had a chance to breathe without, you know, with all of us sheltering in place. And I'm sure there's been some positive impacts to the environment as well. I'm waiting to see what the studies will show in terms of having less human foot traffic out in the wild, in the world,
Hmm.
what that looks like. And I'm sure the planet had a chance to just
Yeah.
for just once
Yeah.
in decades. So I'm hoping that made a positive impact as well. Something positive has to come out of all this tragedy, and loss of life. Like something positive has to come out of all of this. You know.
Well, I think that it has caused, and we're going to get into the meat of what you do, but I love this conversation. I always love this conversation. I think that the tragedy, out of pain, out of chaos, you know, my motto in life has been for over 20 years, there are only 2 days that are important in one's life: the day you're born and the day you know why. And I've been pretty blessed because I found out my why before the pandemic. So I had a chance to actually refine it. But I do believe that there have been some deep conversations that our country and the world has been avoiding discussing for years. And it kicked off. It kicked off with George Floyd. All right.
Oh,
It,
absolutely.
I mean, and a lot of people were like, "Oh my goodness!" So it all of a sudden we were talking about things in our world that are systemic that we really didn't talk about in the past. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I would say I've been a part of some of those conversations publicly and behind the scenes, and you know, to you know, not there's different groups of people, and there's different layers and tiers to different kind of conversations, and there were some folks out there who were genuinely shocked and surprised to see a man be murdered in front of their eyes, because
Yeah.
that was something that we talked about in our communities. We tried to ring the alarm, this is going on, and it just sounded like unbelievable. But when people actually saw it, they saw
That
this
last
man,
breath.
that last breath, the man call out for his mother. Like, for people to see that, like, that tapped into people's humanity. You know, all of the things that they've been fed about big black men, violent, super predators, all of those things, a steady diet of imagery and messaging about us, to see what the reality looked like in those interactions, like that tapped into the consciousness of the country and the soul of the country in a way that I haven't seen that happen in many other instances. You know, there's been a few times in our country's history where those things have happened, where, you know, there's been like a reckoning, a social reckoning, where people wake up and say, we can't do this anymore. George Floyd was like the catalyst for that last year. And, you know, although you don't see Black Lives Matter protests as often on the news media as you did during those times, you know, it did start something that I don't think we as responsible, you know, successful people with voices should ever let go back to the way it was. Like, it's up to us now. You know, George Floyd, you know, rest in peace. You know,
Mm.
much love to the Floyd family for everything they had to endure and go through, and all the other families of people who suffered through those kind of tragedies. But then, us as responsible leaders cannot allow that to be in vain by allowing things to slip back to the way they were. You know, and as the
Exactly.
pandemic eases and our attention goes back to the trivial things that we thought about before, you know, we have to also carry forward all the progress that's been made over the past year, with us holding people accountable for how they treat us, for how they, you know, for how, you know, they represent us, you know, and for us taking time to start to take accountability for to represent ourselves. You know, we have to kind of look at ourselves too. You know, we can't just always look outward. We have to look at ourselves and say, how are we showing up in the world? What are we allowing from, you know, other people? What are we allowing? Uh, you know, you can
Hmm.
only, you know, people only treat you how you allow them to treat you. And what have we been allowing in our homes, in our lives, in our work life? Like, what have we been allowing for all this time? You know, and what do we need to do to transform our relationship with America, our relationship with the world, our relationship with each other? You know, how are we treating each other? Do we show up for each other when a tragedy happens, or do we kind of swipe past it on social media? You know, hit the like button and keep going. How many of us are actually, you know, I one of the things that I love about you, Jadid, is that you walk your talk. You know, there
Oh,
is
thank you.
no there is no lip service. It is what it is, and I knew that from the first time I met you. And I don't want to segue away from where we are, but I just wanted to, you know, give you the
Thank you.
flowers while, you know, you could smell them, because I was a young entrepreneur out in DC on my first trip to the chain with the Chamber of Commerce, the walk to Washington. They would take business from New
Oh,
Jersey to
wow.
Washington. And when I saw you, like, you were surrounded by all the people that I wanted to meet and talk to. And, you know, and it's like those folks would not kind of, I was a young guy, you know, much younger than the room. Um, and I know I was kind of in over my head a little bit, or not even over my head, but I was above the people in the room were above the level of success that I was at.
Well, you're
And
so tall. There's
I,
nothing above you. I always have to do this when I talk to you.
yeah, you and I are occupy different vertical spaces for sure. But you know, you embraced me. You know, you didn't. You know, you were at a certain level, tapped into a certain power structure. But, you know, I could tell you were one of the most powerful people in the room, because all the powerful people in the room were looking to you, right?
Mm,
So, and then,
that's
you know,
humbling. It really is.
yeah, and you embraced me. And you know, some of those folks were like, oh, he's not on our level yet, you know, But no, that's not how you carried
I
yourself.
was
And it
like,
was,
this is Steve Jones. You don't know Steve Jones?
yeah,
You
exactly.
need to know him.
Exactly. And, I never forget that. I never forget those moments, and I make sure, and that impressed me so much that I make sure I do that when I meet other people as well. I make sure I see them for who they are, and not what they can bring, just what they can bring to the table at this time. So just wanted to tip my
Well, I'm
hat
going
off
to
to you.
thank you. I'm going to tell you a very quick, funny story about the chamber trip. During my days, and I want to acknowledge, I see Mary Ann, my good friend out of Syracuse, New York, on here. Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, we're actually on several platforms right now. So I'm not able to see all the comments that come in. So I assure our viewers that I will catch up with them when the show is done. But I do see Mary Ann. Um, but on one of the chamber trips, just to segue into what you were saying, and it was kind of funny to me, but it kind of irritated me for a good 10 minutes. When I was with the Barnabas system, if you sponsor at a certain sponsorship level, you actually get a reserved seat or two on the train. And as you know, the train has thousands of people on it. So Barnabas had sponsored, and I had two seats available. But my CEO, he always would say, Janine, you just go. And so when I walked up, clearly it said St. Barnabas Healthcare System. There was a gentleman sitting in one of our seats, a white guy, and he had that very, very privileged attitude going on with him. And so when I walked up to him, he gave a look like, "Why are you coming into this seat?" So I said to him, I said, "Good morning." And he said, "Good morning." I said, "I'll be sitting here." He said, "Well, I'm sitting here." I said, "No problem, no problem." And he kind of looked at me like, "What do you mean, no problem?" And I started to say, "Well, you're in one of our seats," but I didn't say anything. And he tried to be as kind as he could to a little short black woman. So the train begins to move. And at that time, John Corzine was a U.S. senator, and Jim McGreevey was the governor, and there were lots of legislators, as you know, for that event. So people were coming through, and they were all stopping at the seat. Janine, how are you doing? Blah 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 blah. We're talking, I stand, and oh, Senator, how are you doing? And so people, Congress people, CEOs, they're all moving through. Hey, Miss LaRue, what's going on? So after after about 15, 20 minutes of this, the train's rolling on, we're headed south. The guy looked at me and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, I'm just a little short woman trying to survive. He said, "No, I mean, who the hell are you?" He said, "Why does everybody know you?" And I
Yeah.
said, "Well, I'm a lobbyist." And I said, "But no big deal. Hey, Natalie, how are you doing?" And so we go on. He and I have a great conversation. I find out where he works. As people are moving through, I'm introducing him to everyone, the whole 9 yards. So coming back, you don't have reserved seats. You
Right.
just have to fight for whatever you have on the train. So I was dragging my suitcase, and I'm like, where am I going to sit? And all of a sudden, I hear this voice hanging out of the train. "Hey, Janine, do you remember me? I saved you a seat." I'm like, oh, it was my new buddy. He had saved me a seat, and we had a good old time. And I told my CEO about it, and he said, he'll learn. He'll learn. Success doesn't look like what he thinks it looks like. So
Well,
it's funny.
believe it or not, that is super important that people get to see what success from our skin tone looks like, because it doesn't
Mm.
look like traditionally what people expect success to look like. And I do remember being on a trip with you like that and sitting and watching. I'm like, this woman here is very understated. She's not trying to be the center of attention, but the all all power attract all power to you, and
Well, thank you.
it's an amazing.
Here's the thing, the takeaway that I want our audience to understand. I mean,
Sure.
because I've walked with people literally who are worth billions of dollars. They're worth
Right.
billions. And folks who have no money, but they are just wealthy in who they are. And here's the key that I figured out, that people who get up in the morning, I put my underwear on one leg at a time today. I thank God I have two legs that I can do that. Not everybody does, but they're no different. They're no different than we are. And
Right.
when folks take all of that starstruck stuff away from seeing people whose names they see in the paper, who they see on TV, then the individuals who are on TV, they begin to come down to reality and they begin to be human.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always been that way. I mean, in a
Yeah, yeah,
prior life, I used to be in the music business, and I've been around all kinds of people, and I watch how folks behave around people who they perceive to be powerful or popular, and how they treat other people differently. And I never liked that. That never set right with me. And I've always been the type of person that I have, equally in engaging conversations with the folks who came to clean the office as I did with the folks who ran the office. And, people would find that odd about me, that I was sitting there speaking to, the cleaning people, like, why are you talking? They're people, they're doing a job. They have an interesting story if you ever took time to listen to it. And, I come from very humble beginnings. I was born
mm,
in Barbados. I came to this country when I was 6 years old. And I went back to Barbados a couple of years ago, and I went back to the house that I was raised in. It still has the galvanized steel roof, and we used to have the outdoor bathroom and all. It was
yeah.
amazing to kind of, because when you're young, it looks a certain way, and when you get older, you go back and you could kind of see, this is my humble beginning, and it's like your origin stories. It's definitely part of who I am and part of my journey.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and
It's
I love
special
it.
too. You have a look, you have a view, and we have Natalie McKenzie here, who's from Jamaica. When I met her, she had just come in from Jamaica, and you have a view of America that we don't have. And I love it. I mean, that's why I love our relationship, because you see things a little differently, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's what has helped me to be successful in most things that I've done. Like I said, I've had certain failures, or not necessarily failures, but I've had things that have been life lessons that I didn't intend to start. I didn't start out as life lessons, but I learned a lot from it. And everything I do today is the sum of everything I've learned, whether it was a life lesson or a success story. And yeah, I do look at opportunities differently than other folks. Like, I don't bring a lot of historical baggage to things that I look at. So when I'm looking at the what's in front of me, I genuinely try to see everything available in front of me, not historically, um, what's been, what I failed at in my past, or what someone else failed at in their past. I just genuinely look for opportunities. And I don't look at opportunities as a black man, or as a Bajan, or I just look at what is the world of opportunities look like, and then I try to carve out my piece from that perspective. And I try to look for opportunities for other people. I spend a significant amount of time, people think I'm a recruiter because everybody hits me up and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, do you know anyone? And I'm connecting people with jobs, or I'm
Hmm.
connecting people with opportunities all the time, because I like to see good people win. um, and I just look at it that way. Here's an example of how my way of looking at things, and I'm not going to mention any names, but just an anecdote. In my last company, um, I moved into Newark, and I genuinely tried to build relationships with people who look like me, who are doing the same thing. And these are all good folks doing good business. But I would say that oftentimes we buy into the notion that there can only be one of us at the table. And I operate from a space, we all bring something different to the table, even if we're in the same industry. So there's generally room for more than one of us at the table. We don't only have to have one popular black actor at a time, or one popular black singer at a time, or one popular media company at a time. There's room for multiple companies and multiple service providers to kind of do the same thing, or even partner to go after bigger business. And that's what I tried to do. I try to create partnerships and say, hey, I make $1 million a year, you make $1 million a year. Let's go after this $2 million deal that may be out of reach for me or you, but together we can go after it together. And I just found that that's not how a lot of people think. They don't necessarily look at opportunities as, a synergistic sort of approach can bring. Some folks would rather have 100% of nothing than 50% of something. And that to me is mind boggling, because you can't eat 100% of nothing, but 50% of something could sustain you to the next day, until you find the next opportunity. And it's just, I approach deal making very differently than a lot of folks. And, I approach solving problems very differently than a lot of folks. And it has benefited me as to kind of be a unicorn, because I think I'm a creative guy. I'm an artist. I'm a designer. I used to be a musician. So I think creatively, but I'm also an analytical guy. So I think about all of the implementation and how to get this idea into a real, a real tangible business solution, or just a solution in general. So maybe
We talk
that's,
about your original, the business you had when I met you, because I was just blown away at what you and your team were doing.
yeah, it was a great business. It was a great business until it wasn't. So it started off as I did a favor for a friend, as I normally do. And, a friend of mine asked me, do I know how to do websites? Did one or two before. And I said, sure, I'll help you out. And it turned out that website was for Jay-Z's fan club. And that became a popular site. And next thing you know, I'm in demand. So I'm doing more sites. So I did sites for Cartoon Network. I did sites for, the 9/11 Memorial, a lot of big healthcare companies, a lot of big corporate brands. I worked on building platforms and websites for them. And I had my own unique brand of design. It was a little more cutting edge than what was traditionally out there. So, and flawless execution was a goal. So we would really literally make sure that these sites were pixel perfect, and it was above and beyond what our clients were looking for. And what started off as a home-based business right here in my TV room, next thing you know, I have employees, I have awards, I have contracts, and once you have that kind of momentum, you have to kind of maintain it. And I did not start the business off as a venture that I would sell or a venture that I would expand. It was really just an extension of my creative ability. So it was really centered around me.
Hmm.
And because it was centered around me, it took me to really fuel it. So after 15 years, and it was a lot of great moments, but it wasn't working for me because I could not get myself out of the business, right? Because even though I had a staff and they did great work, it wasn't what people hired the company for. They hired the company
They
because they
hired for
thought I
you.
would sit there and be a part of their solution. And although I kind of directed from a distance, I was more of a salesperson, you know, in my day-to-day job. I was out finding the next opportunity to keep the lights on, to keep people paid, to
And you
keep
weren't
expend.
cheap. Your
No,
websites were not cheap. I
no.
remember when I got my first quote, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to sell two of my kids in order to get this website.
And
And one of the things, let me just say this to you. I don't want to call him out, but I'm just going to say my grandson. My grandson has tuned into this program, and he graduated Penn, but he worked for a couple years at Viacom and just got his dream job at HBO.
oh,
I'm glad
congrats.
he's on here right now hearing this. Maybe I will call him out, Raheem. So I want him to hear your story because he's headed in your direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would love to connect with him offline to hear what he's looking to do, and if I can provide any insights to him. I have a few war stories I can share about the space that
Yeah, you
he
do.
could benefit from. Um, but no, we weren't cheap, and I don't do anything. I don't like the word cheap, um, because cheap is not just cost. You get what you paid for, and we set out to do premium, high end work, and that costs. So you don't go to Mercedes and say, what is your, can I get a cheap car here? No, when you go
Exactly.
to Mercedes, you know what you're paying for because they're reliable at a certain level of luxury. So we delivered on that level. But it was a lot, quite frankly, day to day, it was a mixture. Like at some point it stopped being about me and it started being about keeping payroll, current, right? It stopped being
Mm.
about creativity and winning awards, and it became about, taxes and accounting and all those things, that are essential to running any business, but it became too much of the business in terms of that. And it wasn't, you know, it didn't
It
feel good
wasn't
anymore.
fun anymore.
It wasn't fun anymore. Like
Yeah.
if you ever came to the office, we had a full arcade game in there. We had Xbox. The
Hmm.
walls were bright and colorful. People came there and they didn't want to leave. So I had space carved out for clients who may be going in and out of town. They would come in, hop on Wi-Fi, and sit around, enjoy a coffee and all the food we had. It was really a fun environment. There's a lot of big companies like Google and such that do that, but I was doing that back when everything was corporate.
Wow.
So we were probably 5 years ahead of where everyone who's doing that now was,
Hmm.
at the time. But it wasn't working for me personally. I thought I was, not to be conceited, but I always thought I was meant for something bigger, and I was trying to take the small company and make it into something bigger, and that wasn't working. And just pushing myself against that ceiling just created too much frustration and stress. And then a good friend of mine, Mike, we were down at me, my wife and I were down at Asbury Park, and we were just hanging out. And he asked me, if it's not working for you, not bringing you the kind of money or joy that it once did, why are you still doing it? And I my
Didn't have
and
an answer.
I didn't have an answer because I was doing it out of obligation to others. Like
Hmm.
I'm one of those people who I dedicate a good chunk of my life to helping other people and working for other people, and it wasn't working for myself. And when he said that, my wife leaned into him and said, "Thank you," because she's wanted to say that to me for a long time, and she didn't, because she knew how big of a part of my life that was. And she saw me come home day after day and just pass out. Not even like, I would wake up in the morning and a plate of dinner is sitting on the nightstand next to me while I'm laid across the bed, just exhausted. And I carried it with a smile, but inside I was really overworking
Hurting.
myself, and no vacations, or I would take my laptop on vacation. Like it was, a good friend of mine, Buster Soares from First Baptist Church. I'm sure
He
he's a good friend.
baptized me.
I'm sure he's a good friend to many people. I did a website for him, and I revered him so much. Um, from the first time I met him, and this is not something I'm proud of. I'm saying this was a mistake, but it's something I did. Um, he hired me to do a website for the Rutgers coach Vivian Stringer, and my brother had just passed away,
Hmm.
and I took my laptop to the funeral. That's how deep I was into my commitments.
Mm.
I took my laptop to a funeral, and that is, like, for me, one of the rock bottom moments when I look back, like how obsessed I was with delivering, and you know, so when people say, that you think of hiring a black owned company, they're not going to deliver on time, and all of those stereotypes, I made sure never were attached to my company.
Yeah.
Like, we delivered early, um, and I went through every length I could to make sure that if I promised something, no matter what happened, I delivered. And even doing that, I've never told anyone that, so I don't know why I'm
Mm.
telling you this now, because but I've
Because
never.
someone watching needs to hear that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm a big believer. that there are special moments that occur. And what you just told, I mean, because I've been there, I don't think I've taken a laptop to a funeral service. I mean,
Please
I've done
don't.
some crazy stuff. For real, I've done some crazy stuff trying to show that I am worth it and that I am excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
And there comes a time in your life, and I want to talk about that time, and then I want to talk about pop stock, because there
Okay.
comes a time in your life when you look in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm getting ready to crash and burn. And
Yeah.
it is just time for me to step back. Tell me about that.
Well, that was that moment in Asbury Park where my friend told me, "Why am I still doing it?" Because it was 5, 6 years past its prime. Like it was never. The company was great, doing great work. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars in active contracts at any time. It was, you know, my team was happy, everyone was happy, and I was, just in that space. And that time came, and I saw the signs, and I didn't acknowledge them because I was just so deep into my commitments. And I once he said that, it was August when he said it. By that December, I had already I closed the business. Like I didn't take time to put it in a shape to sell because it wasn't my interest in cleaning, getting it ready to sell. It probably would have taken another 2 years of getting it in shape where someone else could run it the way it needed to be run. I got my team, most of them, I got them jobs. I got my clients over to other companies so I can wind it down responsibly. And then, by that December, I closed the business, and then I took 3 years off. No, about 2 years
Wow.
off. Yeah, and then that's where I started
I call
Pocstock.
it 2 years on.
Yeah, 2 years on mental
Oh,
health
yeah,
repair. That's what that was
exactly.
on. Um, yeah, so I spent a lot of that 2 years just really getting in touch with myself and just shedding a lot of the patterns and the habits that I was in, and not answering every call. I was off social media for a while, for at least a year and a half, off of Facebook and platforms like that for a while. And I just really spent time with my family, my kids, and myself, trying to figure out what I liked again. I was so into being that person, I didn't know what I liked for myself because
Hmm.
everything I did was for other people. So I didn't really, at that point, I had to really, eh, I used to hear it on TV when I grew up in Brooklyn, and you hear people say I'm on a journey and I'm discovering myself, and it just
Hmm.
sounded so abstract. But that's
Right.
literally what I went through. Like I literally did not know myself. I didn't know what I liked in terms of clothing. I went out shopping. I'm like, I don't like any of this stuff. Like, what do I really like? Like, and it was a really a real experience, and that's why I talk about mental health and repair and keeping your sanity and being able to show up 100% yourself, um, when you show up in the world. And if you don't take care of your mental health, you can't ever really fully show up for people. When you're showing
You
up,
can't.
something else is showing along with you, and all that baggage shows up with you, and it doesn't represent us well to keep doing that. So those are some of the things I learned, and you know, over the past year and a half of building Stock, it's been an amazing journey. And people notice a difference. I love hearing people say, "Hey, you seem different." I'm like, "Yeah, I actually slept for a year and a half. I actually relaxed. I actually
It's something what
decompressed."
sleep will do for you, right?
Oh,
I
I'm,
remember when you reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Can we talk?" And we set up that Zoom conversation. I was like, "Where you been?" And as you started talking, and then I'm like, "You look great." I mean, it really
yeah,
was not
yeah.
looking for the next meeting or whatever.
Oh yeah, no,
Fabulous.
it's good, and I have an amazing team of executives, and I did that intentionally. Like I didn't want to start this journey alone because I knew Stock was going to be way bigger than the last company I had, and I did all of that alone. I was pretty much the only executive, so I started off by building my team, so that it's bringing different perspectives, different experience. Not every decision is on my shoulders. Like there's a lot going on with pocstock now, and I get my briefings, but it's not like I have to be involved in every decision, every idea. Like my team is literally the most brilliant
Mm.
people I have in my network. I kind of tap them on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I'm doing this thing that's going to change the world. I need you on board with me." And
Well, I
you could
know
act.
one of your persons. I call her the best photographer in the entire world. In fact, when she did my headset, my headshots, and the one headshot. Once she put it up, it's me in a white blouse. And when she brought the white blouse out, she said, "I want you to wear this." And I looked at it. I said, "Oh, I don't wear white blouses." She said, "No, no, no. I want you to put this on." And she had gone to the woman she had who did the buying. She had gone to the mall, had bought what she thought I would look right in. And I put on the blouse, and I'm like, "No, I don't like white." They put the makeup on me. And then at the end of the session, she said, "All I want you to do is laugh and pop the collar."
Yeah, I
And I
love
am
that shot.
telling you, that shot, everybody's like, "That's the shot,"
That
And
is the shot.
she said, "Janine," she said, "I'm getting so many people saying, I want that shot. I want that headshot." So she's done a few of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tamara is fantastic. You put her behind the lens. She is, there's none other. And I immediately sought out when I started Pockstock. I sought out partners, and Tamara is a partner, a co-founder. She's an integral part of the team. Also, Deshaun Brown. He's one of the most likable, smart, brilliant, strategic guys that I've ever met. And, he's on the team as a co founder as well. And he handles all of our client relationships. And Derek Lorraine has recently been added as our chief operating officer. There was no one else that I trusted to run the day-to-day operation of the company more than I trusted Derek. So he used to run another agency when I had my last agency, and we would sit and we would have lunch and talk about share our entrepreneur woes. Most were HR related, like things
Uh-huh.
with people on the team. But so we built a really great relationship, and now we're building a really great business. And one of the things I'll say, having an idea is great. um, Being able to execute it on the level that the
Right?
idea deserves is a whole nother story. And I took
Yeah.
that first year, I didn't take on any clients, I didn't take on any customers. I just built the team. Then I built the platform. Then I built the content base to make sure that when we open the door for customers, they have a wide variety of choices. And we've been steamrolling ever since for the past year and a half. Like we're at about 60,000 pieces of content right now. We're going to be at 100,000 by the end of the year or more, and 1 million by the end of next year.
So you're going to
So,
tell us what pot stock is. I
oh,
want our
sorry.
viewers, I want them to know what it is. I want them to know what pot stands for, and I want them to subscribe.
Oh, fantastic! All of those things are definitely fantastic. So, Stock is a platform that we developed um, to provide high quality images of people of color to companies to use in their marketing assets. So if you're building a website, you need an image for your banner, you want to feature a person of color, you're sending an email blast, or you're a blogger, um, and you're looking for really good quality, positive images of people of color, that's what our platform exists for. So for decades, there's been stock imagery since 1995 when Getty started. That's the first time I've been aware of stock imagery. And you know people have had a need for diverse imagery or diverse people in their imagery. And and POC is POC, and the POC and POC stock is people of color. So we have images of Black, Hispanic, Asian, and Indigenous and Native American people in our imagery. So that's our focus. But for decades, people have wanted this imagery, and there is no abundant source of the types of imagery they need. So you start to think it doesn't exist, or, you know, Black people don't jet ski, or, you know, Hispanic people don't go, bike riding, because you can't find images of it until now. So we're building our library. So when you go there, check in often at pocstock.com. Go there, check it out, search around, start a subscription, as Janine mentioned. Um, and we add more content every single month. So just because you don't see it there today does not mean it won't be there tomorrow. Um, and over the next year, we're looking to be the world's largest diversity stock media company. And we're well on our way to being that. And right now, people really identify with what they see. Um, there's a movement in advertising to really start to spend more money with diverse businesses like ours. So you're going to see more people of color featured in ads um, when you see ads for top brands. So it's really an important time. A lot of this came as a main priority after George Floyd was murdered, and companies really started to think that, yeah, we can do better. We can do better with Black founders. We can do better with Black businesses. A lot of Black founders don't get funded when they're looking to raise money. Less than 3% get funded. Um, and we get less than 2% of the global advertising budgets for a lot of these agencies. So there's a tremendous amount of room to do better by everyone across corporate and ad agencies. So we're calling them to do better, and buying a subscription at Pocstock is a small way to do better.
Well, I have been very satisfied with your product. And one of the things that, because this show will be moved around the internet, it's showing right now on YouTube, it's showing on a couple platforms on Facebook, it will be showing on LinkedIn a little later today. And I do want to talk to CEOs about their own public relations and advertising departments because I have subscriptions to other imagery companies, and I look at when you put the keywords in and what comes up, it's hilarious.
Oh yeah.
What people feel, the images they want to put out there of Black people, Latinos, and women, and women.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a huge problem, and we're just at the start of the solution. And we're in the frontier of the next phase of diversity. But yeah, no. So some of the images that are out there don't really serve us well in terms of helping people to understand the complexities of the cultures that we come from. There's a lot of rich culture. To say I'm Black, is that's just the start of the conversation. Where are you from? Who what what economic status do you come from, and background do you come from? What educational
Hmm.
background? What cultures make up your Blackness? Are you from the Caribbean? Are you from the southern region? Are you from a big city? Like all of those things to kind of help shape and mold how you show up in the world. And those nuances are things that fly by people's heads. But those are things that we spend all of our time at Pocstock thinking about. Like, how can we accurately showcase all of the beauty of all the people of color that we're representing? Like, we want to know, as much about, you know, uh, the LGBT community, QIA plus community, excuse me,
Hmm.
um, as anyone can, so that when we show their images, they look authentic. You
Right.
know, we want to showcase differently able people and make sure that they show up as authentic, and show their humanity, so that all of the ways that the reason people fear Black men is not because we're inherently scary, is because you've been fed a diet of scary images of us. right?
Right.
We're not. If you look at all the bad things that go on in the world, it's not usually us that's
Right.
that's responsible. But the visuals of what you've seen have painted that picture. You know, I said on to someone the other day about how impactful seeing Claire and Heathcliff Huxtable, two successful Black people raising a family, how impactful that was to the Black community for us to see ourselves as successful.
Right.
Because up until that point, you know, will show up as maids, or other than the Jeffersons, will show up owning the junkyard, or
Dynamite.
yeah, dynamite and clowning, you know, but and living in projects. Like that's the picture the media fed back to us. So that's how we saw ourselves too. So it was a surprise to us to see a doctor and a lawyer married, living a upper middle class life. You know, like that was a
Right.
surprise for us too. So we have to start seeing ourselves in different lights, so that we can then take that light and reflect it into the, you know, the future generations, you know, for us to be a beacon for the future generations.
Well, we're going to leave it there. I have so much enjoy this almost hour with you, Steve. I
Wow.
mean, I'm going to have you back on here. There are so many facets of your life that I would like to unveil with our viewers. It's just that, just a lot of things that we have, the journey that we have walked through, and I just think it's so helpful to everyone. Natalie, thank you so much. Natalie, you need to get Steve on your show. She has the Whole Woman. She has a show that is viewed by thousands, and I just really would like to see you on her show, and I'm sure she'll be reaching out. And Marianne, who is up in Syracuse, is a retired HR person out of healthcare. She can really identify with a lot of what you've said. So thank you for coming on, and thank you, viewers, for showing up. And I know folks are going to be looking at it over the next couple of weeks, the show. I love you, Steve, so much. I love you so much.
I love you
And
too, Janine, and thank you so much for having me on your show, and for everyone hearing my journey and my story. And definitely check out pocstock.com when you have a moment. Love to hear what you think, as well. We're open to feedback.
beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. Take care now.